Qubit arguably has one of the best defined data layer specifications, which they call the Universal Variable, which both of their tools heavily rely on, their personalization tool and their tag management tool. But I've also found clients like to use this structure even when they're using Google Tag Manager. So the trouble with the specification is it's quite long. There's a lot of different objects that you have to get right, and the number of variables that need to be on the page can sometimes run to the tens. We're talking 30, 40, 50. So I'm going to show you how to check that they have been implemented correctly using Data Layer Doctor. So we're going to use Not on the High Street as an example site, and this already has a universal variable attached to it, but we don't know if it's right. So I'm going to create a new project in Data Layer Doctor called Not on the High Street, and I'm going to select the universal variable template to get me started. Now this creates the default JavaScript for all the attributes that we could possibly need based on the Qubit specifications. So it doesn't mean that the Not on the High Street have implemented all of this, but it means that it covers everything. So on the home page, for example, it knows what variables we should have. On the confirmation page, again, the variables change. So here we have a transaction item, which you don't have on other pages. Similarly, on a product page, you have a product object with all of these data variables here. And this matches the specification for here. So you can see product object, got ID, URL, name, description, which matches up here. ID, name, description, URL. So they're all listed here. So once we've created this, Data Layer Doctor now knows what it is expecting to find on the page. And you can come in and tweak this if you need to. So if your developers, for example, don't want to implement Twitter ID or Facebook ID on the website, they can just untick that, and you'll notice that the specifications update automatically and have removed Twitter ID and Facebook ID. But if I'll show you, I'll put one back on, Twitter ID goes back on, you'll see in the specifications here, we now have Twitter ID back on. So I'm going to save that project, and assuming the developers have now followed our documentation, which Data Layer Doctor also produces to show you what needs to go on what page, we can now start the testing process. So I'm going to load up the site, and I'm going to load the Data Layer Doctor Chrome Inspector. Let's just refresh this page. And I'm going to choose my Not on the High Street project, and the version of the specifications we're using are version 1. So this is shown up here. So what this has done is it's now connected this inspector with our specifications that we've just defined. And you can see here we've got all the templates that we're expecting to find on each page. So on the home page, which we're on now, you can see this is their data layer that's been found on the page. So let's see how this validates against what we're expecting to see on this page. So I'm going to hit validate, and instantly we're shown how many variables passed, how many failed, and how many things we're being warned about. So if you have a look here, we can see the basket object. Again, I haven't put anything in my basket, so this is an optional variable anyway, so it just comes up as a warning. The page object, that passed, that's present on the page, but page.type is not present, and we're missing that required variable. If we have a go back, look in the specs, and we look at the page type, you can see that it's useful to have this variable, which is why I've set it as required, but the developers have not placed it on the site. So let's run that once again. And you can see user and version again are not on the site. Now, you might say, well, version is shouldn't be required and users shouldn't be required. So we're going to change that. We're going to head back into Data Layer Doctor, into the editor, and then on the home page, oh, actually, we'll go into variables and we'll change the user object, Everything with a star by it means it's required, so I'm going to turn off user being required. And version, we were expecting version 1.2.1, but I'm going to change that to a dynamic value now. So the developer can expect that value to be anything as long as the version variable is on the page. So let's save that. Again, I'm going to run the check. And you can now see the number of errors has decreased because user is now optional and version is now any value is allowed. So that now passes. Now in the background, every time you do a test and you hit validate, the URL of the page you validate is being recorded, as well as the results. So you can build up a report over time. So I'm going to clear all this for the moment. And we're going to go through each page in turn. So I'm going to validate that page. That result is now saved. So I can come out and I'm going to go to a category page. And again, I'm going to validate this. So here are the specs that were found. Again, you can see that there's a lot of data here. And it's difficult to check by hand. So I'm going to check it automatically. So we see again how quickly that was to check. And everything seems to be okay, but it's just this page.type variable which is still missing. And in the report, you can now see we've got 2 URLs that we've checked. And now let's go into a product. And again, I'm going to check that product. Now this is quite a big one, so we've got 10 passes, 15 warnings and 1 errors. And it actually picks up the values of the page. So this product ID is that. There's the name of the product, description, the manufacturer. A lot of these warnings appear because a lot of these variables are optional. Again, page.type is missing, so that's the one key error. So once you've inspected all the pages you want to inspect and validated them against your data layer specs, you can then generate a report which can be sent to the developers so that they can fix the issues quickly. So I'm going to do that now. We're given a permalink here, which is the URL of the report, and this is permanent, so you can send this to the developers without fear of it disappearing. And in this report, it shows the 3 pages we tested and how they compared to the templates that we had. For example, again on the home page, we had 1 error, page.type, which needs to be fixed. On the category page, again, page.type was missing. And this is the data layer that we found. And on the product page, there was 1 error, page.type was missing. So this can now be sent to the developers and they can quickly scan through it and fix all the errors in red. It's just an easier way, rather than having to type all this up in Excel and then send them the Excel spreadsheet. They can just be sent this link and they can come in here and have a look at the results. So I hope that's useful. You can sign up at datalayerdoctor.com.